Today we're going to be talking about master budgets and performance planning. We can remove this. And so what's really the goal here is we're going to describe budgeting. And so that's the whole point of everything we've learned previously is order to be able to properly build a budget now. And again, this is another very useful piece of managerial accounting that I think anytime you'll go into any management position, you'll have to understand budgeting, how it's built, and how it really impacts a business. And no matter how small or big the company you go into, you're eventually going to need to build a budget. So this will be helpful. We're going to talk about operational budgets, master budgets. We're really going to be focusing on a manufacturing company, but I'll talk about how it relates to a service company. We'll talk about preparing budgeted financial statements and preparing each component of a master budget for a merchandising company as well. So what's the benefit of budgeting? There's benefits both personal, just think about it from a personal perspective. If you budget, you will know how much you need to save in order to make certain purchases. Remember, when I was 18, 19, I never budgeted and I was always broke. Now being a little older, now in my 30s, it's very easy now to plan for large purchases like buying a car. I remember buying my first car with my own money. I had to really plan out how much did I have to save every single month. After my rent, after my food, after all of these other expenses, how much did I have to save in order to be able to buy a car in a year? And so being able to budget helps you plan for the future on a personal level. Once you get married, or if you have partners, a domestic partnership, or if you're working with other people, it starts being more complex because your partner will have goals themselves and you'll have to plan together. Well, maybe you want to buy a house or maybe you want to do a trip. You can imagine it's complex with people. Once you get into an organization, it gets much more complex because you need to coordinate all of the units contributed to meet the company's goals from every department, right? So you have if you're in manufacturing, you have to talk about the manufacturing, you have to talk about the marketing budget, you have to talk about the sales. With a lot of different moving pieces, it gets a lot more complex than just even a personal budget. It also provides a benchmark for evaluating performance. So if we'll be able to tell if we were intended to hit a certain amount of sales. Did we hit it? Did we not hit the sales? Did we spend too much money on products or employees? And we can focus on future opportunities. We can motivate through participation and budgeting. We can coordinate and help employees and departments work towards company's overall goal. And we can communicate management plans throughout the organization. And so it's helpful for managers and supervisors to be able to know what is the company's goals. Are we trying to hit more sales? Are we trying to cut costs? Are we trying to hire new talent? Are we trying to train the talent we currently have? What is the company's goals will all be defined in the budgeting. For example, if you had a company that said, we're going to increase personnel costs 25% over the next year, mainly through hiring new employees, you'd say, oh, okay, we're going to be hiring. But if we heard, oh, we're going to be decreasing employee costs by 25%, say, wait, okay, is there going to be pay cuts or layoffs? And so that budgeting tells managers what we have to be prepared for. Budgeting and human behavior. So it can be a positive motivating force when it's affected employees or consulted. And so what we're going to get into here is what's called top-down and bottom-up negotiations and budgeting. And there's a whole management style that's changed since the early 1900s until now, where if you have the concept, if you have top executive management making budgets without consulting supervisors and lower level management, then you're not going to positively motivate them because your budgets are unrealistic. And so that might be me coming to like my students and saying, hey, there's this much homework and I'm going to double it. And if you don't do it, you can't drop any of it. And if all of you came up to me and said, hey, it's taking me 50 hours a week, I can't do this, then, and I said, that doesn't matter, it's my call, then that would be top-down management. But bottom-up is if what I try to do here, I say, hey, tell me how much time it's taking up for you to do the homework. This is my anticipation, but if it's off, communicate to me so we can figure out how to meet in the middle ground. And so same thing with budgeting and human behavior. If I just told you had a ton of homework to do, and if you didn't do it, you were out of luck, then it could have a negative outcome. But if it can be motivating to say, hey, here's what we need to accomplish in a week or a month, if you know what's expected and is bought off by your employees, if they're challenging but attainable, right? So these ideas of stretch goals are really important, not just in budget, but just in any kind of management, where if you tell me you can make $1,000 in sales pretty comfortably, I'll say, well, let's try for 1,500 because it might make you better and grow as a person. It'll help the business grow. But it'd be very unrealistic to say, well, I need you to make 10,000 because then you just give up. It'd be too hard. Same thing they show with like human psychology, right? If someone tries to lose 4 pounds a week, they're going to give up their diet very quickly. But if you lose half a pound a week, they can stick that out for the long term. Evaluations offer opportunities to explain differences between actuals and budgeted. So this is talking about like what I'd call postmortems. But the idea here is after we finish a monthly period and we've seen all the budgets, everyone gets to see what went off and why it went off and has an opportunity to discuss it and learn about how they can improve as a company and improve as employees. Potential negative outcomes of budgets include employees may understate sales and overstate expenses. And so if this is called sandbagging, that's the layman term. But the idea here is that you might overemphasize how little you can do. You're incentivized to understate your sales because it's an easier target, right? If I say, hey, how many sales can you hit this month? You might personally know you can hit 2,000 pretty comfortably, but you might tell me 1,000. So when you do hit the 2,000, you're like, hey, look how great I am. So we have to be careful with this, or overstate expense. If I say, how much does your lunch cost? You might say, oh, it costs me $50. I normally eat $50 lunches at home, which would obviously be absurd. But I've seen companies spend $50 a lunch on their employees because they don't take this into consideration. There might be pressure to meet results. So if we have sales targets and you don't hit those sales targets, it can be pretty uncomfortable. And if your job is on the line, then you might be tempted to do some illegal activity or commit fraud. And employees may purchase unnecessary items to ensure budget is not reduced. So we see this a lot. This is very common in companies, but if you don't spend your budget, then you might get it reduced in the next period. And so employees are generally might waste their money or commit budget that they really don't need to spend in order to keep their budget for their department. So we have to be careful of all of these aspects while trying to keep the positive motivating force going on. And so budgets normally are in quarterly or monthly lags. So the idea here is a rolling budget. So we have our first quarter, and then we'll plan, during our first quarter, we'll plan for the second quarter. And during our second quarter, we'll plan for the third quarter, and so on and so forth. And what they're saying here is on December 2018, they know what first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter is for 2019. Like we'll plan a year out on a quarterly basis or even a monthly basis. And then at the end of March, which is the end of the first quarter, they'll plan out to the first quarter. And you'll continue to revise these budgets on a quarterly basis. This is called a rolling budget. You can either do it quarterly or monthly.